Hello. Good morning. Good afternoon, depending on where you are. I'm Patrick Tucker, Technology Editor at Defense One. Joining me today is Richard Marco, CEO of ESET. Fantastic company. We're going to talk today about applications of artificial intelligence in cybersecurity, both the good and the bad. And this is a vitally important topic because if you are like me or you've been awake for the last few years, you know that we're all beset all the time by very aggressive marketing about what artificial intelligence can do for businesses, what it can perhaps do for individuals. We don't hear a lot about how it might cause havoc unless you're watching science fiction movies. So there's this strange divergence, right, in terms of the marketing that we consume and the content that we consume, where on the one hand, we're being told all of the great things that AI can do for us as a tool, all beset all the time, and we're often scared through hyperbole and fiction about what it might do when it's unleashed. But Richard here, you actually operate at the center of where those two worlds collide, creating cybersecurity solutions through artificial intelligence and also watching how potential adversaries might use the most important emerging technology of the 21st century to cause problems and wreak havoc. So first, I wonder if you can tell us anything about whether you've seen actual examples today of artificial intelligence, whether machine learning or something more complex like neural networks, used as part of a cybersecurity attack. Is this something that exists right now, perhaps?
Right. So it's definitely a field that is attracting a lot of attention, and everybody is like feeling, you said it very correctly. There is quite a bit of hype behind the term artificial intelligence. So in many cases, people just imagine that there is some independent intelligence working in the background, and in this case, producing some malicious attacks, software, and so on. In general, you can't easily tell whether machine learning or artificial intelligence was used in a particular attack unless you have a clear evidence. So you might see signs of it, but unless you confiscate servers and you see that the attackers were using the machine learning or artificial intelligence in general, you can't have a proof. But among the things that we consider are probably influenced by or might be using artificial intelligence are things like, for example, the spam campaigns. You need to produce a text that looks like it's coming from a human being, that is easily readable, that is able to persuade people to do something. It's written in different languages, and this is where artificial intelligence, as an example, can play a very important role. In the past, like let's say 5 to 10 years ago, we saw many examples where you saw this kind of phishing email coming to you, and you knew right from the beginning that it's a mess. It was just words, in wrong orders and so on. Right now, it's a lot better, and it's only improving.
Okay, so this is, to your mind, something that we're actually already experiencing. We're already experiencing applications of artificial intelligence in cyber attacks. Tell us a little bit about the state of the art of artificial intelligence in defending from not only those attacks, but really all of them. I know from my coverage of this area that one of the things AI does is rapidly accelerate the pace of operations, and defending against potential cyber attackers is something that you have to do very promptly and in many ways almost predictively. So what is the current state of the art of using AI in cyber defense? What does that look like right now?
So the machine learning, or like the current version, deep learning, is especially powerful when you are able to process, or you want to process some big data. You have a lot of data that has contains some patterns that can be classified to, let's say, malicious, non-malicious. So if you have that, then you can use these machine learning algorithms to train your model, as it is called, to be able to distinguish it. But you need to be careful on what you put as an input into it. If you are too general, you expect too much from it, then the results might be just disappointing. So in our case, and I believe we are at the edge of using machine learning in malicious software kind of protection, is that we use several kind of algorithms that are not machine learning in pre-processing inputs into the models that use deep learning to do the final decisions. And usually we use several of such models for different scenarios.
So do you envision, based on what you've seen, that artificial intelligence is going to accelerate both the pace of cyber attacks and the pace of necessary defense? So it becomes almost like an arms race, if you will. Is that the future that we're headed towards?
I would say so, because the example I gave about the phishing emails is just the part, it's generally accepted that the human beings are usually the weakest point in the defense. So if you are able to trick the right people, then you are able to penetrate the overall defense quite well, usually. So this artificial intelligence is exactly going in the direction to be able to interact with the human beings in a way that they don't realize this is artificial intelligence in the background, or they don't realize they are being manipulated into doing some steps. So yeah, it is going to accelerate this and make it more tricky.
And can you describe for us very quickly, in this accelerated future, what is the role for classically trained cybersecurity professionals? It's something of an art as well as a science. You have to learn a lot about the psychology that attackers might use in developing phishing emails like this. And you have to understand different methodologies that different attackers have used. It requires a lot of experience to become really good at this. And the best practitioners in cybersecurity have very deep experience with specific attackers. So what is the role of professionals like that in a future where this tool is very widely available?
So we need to realize that even these so-called deep networks, so they contain a number of layers, a number of neurons, they are far, far from what the human brain is like the capacity of human brain. So usually the artificial intelligence is still very much dependent on human intelligence to kind of direct it, to train it in the right way. What is artificial intelligence better than the human is the ability to use these IT tools, like a lot of memory, a lot of information, and process it quickly. So a human being is just not able to do this in the same way. So this is where I see this connection. You have you create your models, your neural networks that are able to process a lot of information based on what you train them for, like identifying anomalies in a network, traffic or whatever it is, because you can't do it like human being can't do that. But yeah, machine or neural network can.
Yeah, and this is, I think, also an important point, because we talk a little bit about machine learning, and you also talk about neural networks, and there's something of a difference between them. Machine learning is the application of somewhat conventional statistical methods to a problem using big data and very large compute. And neural network methodology relies on somewhat more abstract and complex algorithms, and the process by which a neural network reaches its conclusion or reaches its output is often very mysterious to the operator. It's difficult to understand. And I know from writing about this space that policymakers and people that have to be accountable to electors and voters, they are sometimes very hesitant to employ neural networks precisely because they have difficulty describing the process by which that neural network reached the conclusion that it did. How do you tell a voter that a neural network decided that they were suspicious and deserved extra security check? Like it's a very inconvenient conversation. So where are we right now in terms of taking neural networks and making them more explainable to the public and to operators? Or is that not something that's actually possible, given the nature of that tool?
Yes, that's a very good kind of indication that it's, in my opinion, the nature of this technology, the neural networks, that it's kind of universal tool to work with data and to be able to make some decisions. And you have some universal algorithm how you train these networks, but then it's usually very difficult to know exactly why they do the decisions that they do. And what is being more and more uncovered and shown is that while there are those fancy examples of neural networks doing almost magic, then it's quite often very easy to fool them, to make completely wrong decisions for things that for human being are obvious, because we just don't see all the vulnerabilities of the design.
So, and this speaks to a growing area of research and study, which is safety in artificial intelligence. It's something that's becoming more and more important, especially as governments and militaries begin to adopt artificial intelligence solutions on top of businesses. It's one thing if your algorithm outputs you a wrong suggestion for showing an ad to somebody. It's very different if your output sends you wrong targeting information for a military operation. That's very bad, generally speaking. So, when you look at the resources that are required to really run a good artificial intelligence program, and there are three: you need a lot of data, you need a lot of compute power, which is today available through enterprise compute solutions, say like Azure from Microsoft, AWS, all sorts. I don't have any connection to them. And you need these statistical algorithms. When you look at those resources, do you see a future where attackers, even very low-level criminal groups, will potentially have access to them in the same way as large institutions, as governments, and as entities that are bound to defend? Are those resources becoming more available?
Well, I would say that there's simply a lot of money in cybercrime, and you have all the different groups. Some are really just pure criminals looking for some financial gains, but we know that there is state-sponsored, cyber thing going on. So I think there is already enough money to use whatever tools that are available. If we go down to low-level criminals, as you indicated, I would say even right now the ability to design your own neural networks and to use it to process your own set of data is available basically to anybody already right now. And I think this availability will be even bigger, and so it will be more and more easy to design more and more complex networks and use all the results of the research that is going on all the time. So yes, from this perspective, definitely yes. But to be able to correctly use or efficiently use this technology for your means is a different thing. It's not so obvious. It's not so. As I say, it's not intelligence by itself. It's not working on its own. You need to employ it.
Yeah, and to your mind, legislative efforts, regulations like GDPR, like different regulation regimes that apply specifically to data and often personal or private data, do you see those as having a positive or negative effect on this threat that you mentioned? It obviously makes it a little bit more complicated to run a legitimate business because data is harder to come by because of GDPR. But does it also decrease the threat? What is your opinion?
So I noticed there is a draft of what is called, I think, Artificial Intelligence Act that is being created by European Union or European Commission, and it really tries to address some of the known concerns, like, for example, using artificial intelligence to kind of score how people behave if you cross the street with the red light and these kind of things, and it explicitly says this is prohibited. This is not allowed way of using this. And it goes to many different areas and actually sounds quite reasonable to me. But when we talk about cybercrime, of course, they are not limited by legislation. So it's more about probably the leadership, the governments not misusing machine learning in areas where it already can do some harm.
There's a couple of questions that we've got, and I'd like to ask the first one. This is an area that I'm very interested in, and I think that anybody that lives in Eastern Europe and is very concerned about Russian misinformation efforts should also be interested in it. How does disinformation come into the future of AI? Is it a threat to its future development? So a little bit on disinformation and influence campaigns and the role of artificial intelligence in those in the future.
Right. I guess this is unfortunately the space where artificial intelligence, even with the current state, is able to help, like to do harm. So what the artificial intelligence is able to do is to use the existing text, the existing information available on the internet, and then to combine it to produce new texts. And the text might even look like reasonable, but they might be false. They might be not based on any real evidence or whatever. Then we have this relatively well-known like deep fake, these fake videos that are already quite good and will only be better in the future. So like it really can be helped to create chaos, to make it very difficult to distinguish reality from like just whatever.
Do you see a role of AI in helping attackers determine which individuals might be most susceptible to disinformation, as well as what messages they might be vulnerable to? Is that also a role for AI?
Sure, because I think we already see it with being used in commercial practice, like YouTube and so on. You get the recommendations for your next videos, and probably all of us who ever used it, we see that it actually works well. So these algorithms are able to kind of identify the bubbles, like these pieces that make people believe that this is something they want to read or they are interested in that. And so then you can couple it with whatever misinformation you want, and probably the impact will be significant.
Yeah, so I think this is a really important point, because if you watched Russian disinformation campaigns aimed at the US electorate in 2016, for example, what you saw was an expert use of what is given away information to social media outlets like Facebook, information that we all give away basically all the time, whether we kind of realize it or not, even if we're not on those networks currently, that used in order to deliver very specific people very deliver misinformation messages. And the accelerating effect of AI just means a lot more of that. So that is I think highlights the importance of potential regulation. And on regulation, very good question from Tyson Barker. What do you think of the explainability requirement in the draft AI regulation?
Just please try to explain. I'm not sure.
Yeah, the draft AI regulation.
Right, yeah. Explainability. Okay, yeah. I see. Right. So, you liken or you compared artificial intelligence to statistical kind of models or methods. And yes, with statistical models, you can usually tell like why the model is doing what it is doing. With artificial intelligence is not usually not possible at all. So probably like trying to be able to tell like why it works the way it works is going to be difficult. But you can do some countermeasures to ensure higher safety. So very simple one, or very general, is just human supervise on critical like decisions. That it's because human being has this ability to distinguish obvious wrongness from reasonable recommendation. Yeah.
I think that this speaks a little bit to some of the efforts that we've seen by militaries, particularly the US military, to employ artificial intelligence in a way that keeps human beings accountable. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but the US military has adopted a long list of ethical principles that they'll use when applying AI to their operations, hopefully. It's very good that they adopted the list. Whether or not it's employed as prescribed, that becomes something that individual commanders will make decisions about. But to your mind, have you seen any of the lists coming out of Google, coming out of Microsoft, coming out of other big Silicon Valley players, lists of ethical principles that apply to the use of artificial intelligence? And what do you think of them? Are they sufficient, or do they not go far enough?
Well, I didn't study this in detail. I noticed it as a kind of regular kind of input. So you can stay on a quite general level, and on that level it would just sound good. You simply don't want to have artificial intelligence being used against humans, misuse, their weaknesses against them. But then what it means in practice is more tricky, because you gave an example, Facebook, but we know that for Facebook is, like, from a commercial perspective, is kind of helping them if when people are getting into fights and arguing about their point of views and bubbles clashing and so on. And so like balancing these ethical aspects with the pure business, that's a tricky thing.
Yeah, very interesting research paper out quite recently that looks at viral tweets, viral social messages, and the ones that go most viral tend to be the ones that state an angry political opinion, believe it or not. So you can imagine that being weaponized and automated, and as you say, accelerated and scaled up to the point where human beings can't properly control or defend the onslaught of that new messaging, and then that makes virality in internet context almost irrelevant, just destroying the joy of social media for everyone, if you had any. Very good question here from Dr. Vera Roboskrinka. Russia and China are investing in cyber capabilities. How do you see a role of the EU in tackling potential future superiority in the cyber domain? So Russia and China are also investing a lot in artificial intelligence. They both have cyber operations, offensive, and of course have constructed elaborate cyber defensive measures as well. What is the role of the EU in helping democratic nation states better compete in that area?
Right, so I guess the focus already moved from fighting and battles like a physical to more like virtual, right? And so it's logical that there is quite a bit of investment in this from all the superpowers. Now, the EU just needs to decide what role they want to, or we want to have. We know the statistics. The statistics are saying the investment into cybersecurity in general in startups, like 90% goes to US and let's say Israel, for example. So it's just a tiny portion that is left for the rest. So I would suppose that we already see that the cybersecurity is becoming more kind of, China is closing what kind of technologies are allowed to be used by Chinese organizations or institutions. We see this in other parts of the world, Russia, for example. So probably European Union also needs to ensure that there is enough research and development going on within European Union in this space, whether it's cybersecurity in general or machine learning, artificial intelligence, like a field of itself. Yeah. So I think like recognizing or identifying what we already have and how to boost it further so that we are not dependent on the technologies being imported from abroad.
Okay, so a final note, a endorsement for the importance of alliances and an endorsement for the importance of individual and independent research dollars in this very important field. That is all the time we have for this session. I want to thank you and remind you all, please stay here. There's a session on 5G coming up right now. But thank you very much. Please join me in thanking my guests. Thanks.